Hi, Hannah. Welcome to the FIT Sustainability Conference. This is very exciting to have you and representing Allbirds, and I'm looking forward to our conversation about your position there and your role in the sustainability goals for the company.
Yeah, me too. Thanks for having us.
Thanks. So I think I'd like to start with by asking you to give me an introduction about your background and what led you to Allbirds, because you have an interesting work history.
Yeah. I lead sustainability at Allbirds, which is the basically I have the broad mandate of managing both our environmental and social impact across our product and supply chain and broader business. Um, I've been here for about 3.5 years, and before that, I studied environmental science from university, knew that climate change was the issue that I was most passionate about and really wanted to dedicate my career to. But I also knew that I wanted to do that through the private sector and through business because of the ability of the private sector to move so quickly on these really urgent issues. And I knew nothing about business upon graduating from college. So I went to work at Bain and Company, which is a global consulting firm working with Fortune 500 clients across all different industries. And my goal there was really to get inside the mind of a CEO and understand what would drive decision making so that I could harness that power for good. And was really lucky to find this role at Allbirds, where I could bring the two worlds back together and really build a sustainability program brick by brick at a company that really cared and that had made this part of its founding story from the beginning.
Right, right. Oh, that's amazing. Well, so for some of our students out there that might be interested in a role similar to yours, like what's your day-to-day activity like? I mean, clearly it's different this year than the first 2 years, but for someone who's looking at many of our students have questions about different actual job
Mhm.
titles and the job roles, and I'm sure sustainability manager could be a new role for many companies. So what's your day-to-day look like?
It's really the best because there's no day really looks the same and there's never a dull moment. I think the part that I am missing this year is the travel piece because a
Mhm.
big part of my job would be going both to visit all steps in our supply chain. And I think what's cool about my job is that I get to cover every part of it from raw materials through manufacturing. So I'm going to wool farms in New Zealand and textile mills in Italy and factory in Asia, which is just so awesome. But in the last year, when traveling hasn't been so easy, still a lot of diversity of work. I'd say I'm doing everything from meeting with climate change leaders and setting long-term carbon targets to sorting through trash at the office, really whatever needs to be done. But I'd say generally I could probably bucket my work into three main categories, which is like consulting with the product team on new product development, what materials to use, how to source them, how to drive the carbon footprint of our products down. The second would be a lot of work with marketing and figuring out how to tell the story to our customer, and more than that, to create broader change in the industry and push other companies to do the same. And then the third is a lot of industry level work, I'd say, interfacing with other sustainability functions at other companies, or engaging in working group type stuff to help make change at the industry level as well.
Well, those are like the exact types of questions that I wanted to
Cool.
ask you today. So one, in terms of working with the design team and, the internal team and visiting your farms and factories and everything, how do you interact with the design team, or like at what level would you say that the design team asks for your help or you ask for theirs, for our design students out there? How early in the process, or how are you involved with
Yeah.
that?
You mentioned earlier, I think that like this could be a new function for some companies. I think we're still on the beginning of the adoption curve there. And so one of the biggest questions is where in the organizations should sustainability sit? And at Allbirds, from the beginning, sustainability has been integrated into the innovation function within the broader product team. So alongside product strategy, design, and development.
Mhm.
And that I think has been like critical to our success, both because product is the like financial engine of the company, it's what we do and offer to the world, as well as the driver for our environmental impact. So those are my teammates, you know, like when I joined the company, there were probably like 7 or 8 of us on the product team in total. Now we're a little bit bigger, but we're still extremely close. And I think it really is a push and pull. I think it like often we're looking for clarity or to simplify rules and guidelines and like pass those across departments to streamline things, but that's not actually what leads to the most interesting or best answers, I feel. Like what actually makes the biggest impact is having relationships and conversations. So like as much as I will create like low carbon design guidelines to pass to the team, the designers will also pull on me and say like throw a meeting on my calendar and say I had this idea for a really uh like a performance shoe and I want to figure out how to make it as sustainable as possible, like can we brainstorm? And I think like that is probably even more effective. And design specifically, I feel like it's the first step in the process really of like imagining what a product's going to look like, and in a lot of ways sets the tone for how sustainable a product can be. Like if the designers make a really heavy boot made of like really heavy duty materials, like we're kind of limited in terms of how much we can improve that product or lower its carbon footprint. So I think engaging with design is really critical.
Then put
Yeah.
him in his pen.
Well, and obviously Allbirds is known very well for your new materials. And so are you involved in that a little bit? I mean, I understand I want to talk about the carbon footprint and the labeling and everything, and I think that's a big area of your focus. But in terms of the material development, I don't see how they could do that without your input with the knowledge that you have of impact.
That's the other half of our team. So, like when we talk about the innovation function, basically it's
Okay.
like sustainability on one side and material innovation on the other. And like we are the same, kind of holding different parts of that equation. I'm not the one with
Right.
like the PhD in polymer science. Like my teammate has that ball firmly. But I'm the one who knows like if we're like, for example, we developed or brought to market sugarcane based foam that we now use in our shoe soles, that replaces conventional EVA. And they developed that material, but like my job is okay, it's made from sugarcane, it's coming from this part of the world. Like, here are the things we need to watch out for in the supply chain. Here are the certifications we need to get, and how we should think about its environmental impact.
Great. So in that evaluation and all of that, I think, and you can tell me, I mean, where did the inspiration or the direction or the goal for the carbon labeling come from? Is it, some people might say, well, that's a marketing effort, and others will say it's a sustainability effort. What's that conversation look like in Allbirds, to really go, because that's a lot of work and a lot of labeling, and how is that?
I think it's both a sustainability and a marketing effort, a consumer education effort broadly that evolved really organically from our own experience trying to understand the impact of our products. So, like I mentioned, Allbirds was founded with sustainability at the heart of its mission as a public benefit corporation, using natural materials in this industry that's relied really heavily on synthetics. So we had all these kind of qualitative best practices lined up. But of course, the question is like, how do we measure that we're better than
Yeah.
what else is out there? And so we commissioned these like really deep scientific studies of our products to calculate carbon impact of each of them. And over time, as we like developed more of an instinct around that, actually built our own Excel model essentially that allows us to gather information from product design and development around the different components of the product, what they're made out of, how much they weigh, where they're being manufactured, and pull that all together into what we call the carbon score or the carbon footprint of each of our products. And our tool allows us to do that pretty quickly and in real time and on our own using a methodology that we've had verified, but we're not doing like one-off studies for each product.
Right.
And once we had all of that information, we were like, well, what good is it? Of course, we use it to like make decisions and improvements around our product, but what good is it just if we keep it to ourselves? Like, our ultimately, like, we're asking customers to make a better choice for the planet, but they have no information besides marketing campaigns, eco-friendly, sustainable, green product lines. And this was a way to put some numbers behind that, and make that transparent to our customer, both as a way to like hold ourselves accountable to our impact. And once we have mainstay products that don't change very often, and
Yeah.
so like the number is the number and it better come down over time if we do what we say we will. But more broadly, to enable a better understanding among customers of the impact of the stuff that they buy, in the same way that we kind of have this understanding for like nutrition on food or calories on food, um, so that they could actually use that information to make better decisions, and hope that more and more companies will start to put this kind of labeling on products.
Yeah. I love that comparison to the product label because it just seems everybody's so familiar with it now, with the nutrition label, sorry.
Mm-hmm.
And equating that carbon label and then nutrition label to judge your purchase. And I think that it's really smart. So how can you do that as a company on your own and then encourage other companies to follow or join, not necessarily follow, but um, do you share the methodology of making those evaluations, and or can you help guide other companies,
Mm-hmm.
because the nutrition label works because of the standards of the label that are set up, but if everybody's going to do their own evaluation, then a carbon label could become very confusing because there's different methodologies.
Definitely. We absolutely need to move to a broader industry standard. I think part of the reason we waited a little bit to start publishing ours is we were like waiting for that industry standard to emerge. And we're like, we don't want to put more noise out there. But at some point, we realized like, look, we don't have time to say like 2 more years, 5 more years,
Right.
and we'll have a standard. Like, let's at least put ours out there. Maybe others will adopt it. And we do work with other brands, like get outreach from other brands all the time who want
Mhm.
to understand how we do it. Um, like people will help us to make it better. We'll make it better over time. And when ultimately we need probably some sort of regulation to come in and create the standard that all brands have to follow. And at that point, like we'll fall in line with that strategy. But
Yeah.
for now, like I think what we're doing right now is really demonstrating that other brands can label their
Yeah.
products, and that having some information, assuming good intent and that brands aren't trying to like manipulate the data, um, is better than having no information,
Yeah.
and will make it better as an industry over time. I think a great example of that is our partnership with Adidas, to work together to create the lowest carbon performance shoe possible. And through that partnership, like that, they've never labeled a product with its carbon
Right.
footprint before. Um, it wasn't a muscle that they had so much, but of course, our like experts in shoe manufacturing and have done some really cool innovations on their side. And so a lot of the partnership has been helping them to understand how we calculate the impact of our product and how we could scale it to their products as well.
Right. Yeah, that was one of my questions. And, I mean, some of your materials are open source, and I was wondering if the carbon, your evaluation system for carbon is similar and that it could be shared, or
Mhm.
or is maybe working with Adidas the start of that, like how to share this information and collaborate with other even though they might be competitors, they're also collaborators.
Definitely. It is a start to that. And we are working or thinking more broadly about how we can share open source that, because you're right, it's a key tenet of our business and has been from the beginning, is at every turn, like every time we feel like we've unlocked something new or brought a new material to market, how do we make that more available
Right.
to the industry? Because for a couple of reasons, like one, from an impact perspective, like our mission is to reverse climate change. Allbirds is not going to do that by ourselves. We need the scale of these big companies in order to actually see impact at a global scale. And then two, like the sort of uh, more business way to think about that is economies of scale. And as these materials become more mainstream, we're going to get better at producing them, the costs are going to come down, and that's going to benefit everyone. Um, so like again with the sweet foam, we call it sweet foam, the sugarcane
Right.
based EVA example, which we released a couple of years ago now, like we're just seeing that trickle through the product launch timelines from other brands. So in the last like few weeks, we've seen um, brands like UGG and others come out with using that material, and that's certainly going to benefit us in the long run too.
Right, right. Good point. And especially if it can bring the price down if more people are using it. Well, I'll do a little pitch for our students, because our students struggle to get their hands on innovative materials. I think a few years ago, I spent like $50 to get this much of a mushroom leather, and um, I think that it can be difficult to bring it into an academic curriculum when you can't access it, like if every student had to work and design with sugar foam, then that would be in their vocabulary and their repertoire and their portfolios, and they take it forward. So this is my pitch to think about the students and the accessibility, even not just for other businesses, but actually for like independent designers or students to access, because I think I see that as something that's growing and can be added to our curriculum, is really the material development, studying and prototyping and everything. Well,
Yeah,
and
it is
yeah,
really hard. It is really hard. I think the way that we've thought about that from one direction is like the more mainstream these materials become, the more accessible they will become on a
right.
smaller scale for smaller brands or students to use. But I think you're right. There is like the other way to come at it too, which is like figuring out ways to put small batches in the hands of the next generation of product designers who will bring it with them as they go forward.
Yeah, and on that same note, do you obviously sustainability is becoming a major focus from every angle in curriculum and academic curriculum. I don't know how, studying it yourself and now working in the industry and various industries for a while, how do you think it could be added to the curriculum, or not? Because I don't think it can be a separate thing anymore. I think it has to
Hmm.
really be all integrated into all areas, from liberal arts to design to science, obviously. But do you see anything, or do you work with any schools, or beyond, being asked to speak in this
Yeah.
way, but or even like design projects or contests or things like that?
Yeah, certainly something that we're thinking more and more about. We've had a really good relationship with the school called Pencil
Right.
over the last um, year or so and are working to formalize a partnership there to bring some students through some design challenges and projects. And I think that is absolutely like a part of the longer term strategy as we start to strengthen this community muscle that we're trying to build,
Yes.
to start pulling through these ideas really early on, because I do think like that's really the key to our success. Like I can set the goals and make a strategy, but like I'm not actually accountable to any of that work, or I don't do any of the work. Like I'm not designing the products, I'm not shipping them, I'm not
Right.
like engaging directly with different parts of the business, and that's all owned by the people in these functions, whether it's product development or supply chain or design. And we will succeed or fail based on how much those people care about sustainability and how versed that they are. Because of course, like part of my job, a lot of my job is educating and helping kind of to bring in that curriculum
Mm.
to the business for people who didn't have any formal training or it's new. But it is such gives us such a head start when the people in the functions directly have some sort of experience around sustainability. And I think you're totally right. It can't be separate. Like, tripling the size of my team isn't going to increase our effectiveness that much. It's
Right.
more whether we can embed it within the functions themselves.
Yeah. Well, I have to ask the pandemic question, which is just, has this pandemic led Allbirds to any more sustainable solutions? I mean, everybody had to change their lifestyle, their work lifestyle, obviously cut down on travel, so you can tick that off on saving in your carbon footprint. But have you been forced to, and to your benefit though, come up with any sustainable solutions because of this current situation?
I think in the world of product and product development, I think that was really the hardest thing for us to figure out because we were such a physical in-person team and still relatively small team. So certainly figuring out how to do like fittings remotely or product wear tests, like getting
Mm.
our digital systems better set up for that. And then like sampling and prototyping and modeling, figuring out how to do at least more of that digitally, became a necessity. So certainly like around the margins, I would say
Yeah.
that helped us to reduce our impact. And I'd say the broader trend is just that sustainability, both from an internal motivation standpoint and from like the trends of the industry, I think has accelerated,
Yeah.
um like by a lot over the pandemic in a way that I just didn't expect. It's like
That's
feels a
good.
little counterintuitive that like we've got all these other big problems, more immediate maybe problems going on, and you know we're not like businesses aren't as financially successful maybe in 2020. You would think that it would go out the window, but I feel like the consumer appetite and pressure and then like regulatory trends around the world have been so strong that like I'd say our level of ambition has increased even further in the
Well,
last year.
that's great because I asked faculty and students to what questions they would like to ask you if we were in a panel in the auditorium at FIT. And
Mhm.
one faculty member was actually commenting about, has the pandemic overshadowed sustainability and really sort of suppressed it? But I'm glad to hear in your opinion, you feel the opposite, which is great for
Yeah.
the sake of,
Yeah, and that's pretty consistent with what I've heard
uh,
from peers too, which I think is, again, kind of surprising to me, but is definitely the way that it's trending and like more and more. And I'm reading articles every day about how things are heating up even further. And so I think it's really exciting.
yeah. So one of my questions is, why do you keep using a shoebox? I feel like besides, and we have an incredible packaging design department at FIT, so I don't want to hold them back, but it's materials, it's ink, it's waste. I mean, and I know there's been other, different shoes and shoe companies playing around with that, and I know it's probably not easy to preserve the product, but I'm curious how that hasn't been taken out of the delivery in Allbirds to save money and carbon.
It's a great point. I'd say it's one of my personal crusades as well. Um, it's been something that has been weirdly, like, not weirdly, but it's been a core of our approach from the beginning, even from like years ago, in just streamlining the packaging, realizing like, hey, why do most shoes come in a shoe box inside of another box?
Right.
And so like the first thing we did was make that one and the same. So if you order a pair of Allbirds, you just get, it comes in the shoe box.
The shipping box, right.
But to your point, it is one of the greatest opportunities for carbon reduction because it's material. It's a lot of material in terms of weight.
Right.
So it's like if we use 100% recycled packaging, so it's a low carbon material, but it's a lot of weight that hits not just the materials, but the transportation emissions, the end of life emissions.
Right.
And so I think it's one of the biggest levers we have to reduce our product carbon footprint. Of course, it is also probably the area where you want to tread the lightest, because the worst thing we could do is like not have take the box away and the shoe arrives to the customer damaged, and then they don't want to wear the shoe and the whole thing was for naught.
Well,
so
I did speak with someone else, and they tried a project of shipping shoes without boxes, and it created a lot of issues just with how they arrived, and also how the retailer was then going to actually stock and store these items that were no longer in a box. So there are a lot of issues to think of to take it out. But
certainly like some of the considerations even around like the fact like that shoes need to be presented to you like next to each other with stuff inside them. Like what if we were to like nest them on top of each other, and then the box could be like more of a sphere or a cone instead. Like I think there's a lot of cool, exciting ways to do that. And I think oftentimes the conversation gets stuck around the material that you're using. Like, could we use some like bio-based, biodegradable stuff? And I actually don't think that that's the biggest barrier. I think it's how do we reduce waste?
Right, because the size affects the weight. It affects your shipping container. You've now reduced, you can get more into a container. I worked for a company, we did a major packaging evaluation, and you end up reducing in a lot of categories by making something smaller. So one of our students has a question, which was, how do you envision Allbirds evolution, within the next 5 to 10 years?
Exciting things ahead. We are going to continue to grow as a business and try to displace the incumbents and the not as good products that are out there, try to provide more options for customers, more sustainable options for customers. But we have to do that, of course, responsibly and while cutting our emissions and our impact by even more than we are growing. So we've kind of set up a moonshot for ourselves there, but it's one that we're very determined to achieve. And I think in particular, one area of focus that's kind of on the long-term radar is regenerative agriculture and getting all the way upstream in terms of our material sources and directly with farmers to regenerate the land and ultimately store more carbon in the plants and vegetation where we're growing these materials. And then hopefully we continue to push more transparency around carbon labeling. And I think if we think about 10 years from now, maybe even 5 years from now, that like that will be almost as prevalent as calories on food,
Right.
and just something that we expect of brands, we expect to see on products.
Yeah. Do you think you'll focus on the end of life of the product? Because I think that's an important issue, and I know that is a very big challenge, particularly with
Yeah.
shoes, because of the components and adhesives and multiple reasons. But I know a lot of companies are trying to tackle that, and it's
Hmm.
not easy. Is it something you think Allbirds wants to take on?
Yeah, it has to be a part of the solution.
Yeah.
Like I always say, like we're after zero emissions, like we're after a future where we actually don't emit anything as a company. And in order to do that, like we have to do everything. It can't be like an either or conversation. It has to be an and conversation. So that has to be part of the answer. I think it's probably more of an infrastructure challenge than a product challenge.
Uh-huh.
Um, like I think the limiting factor today is that we don't have systems and infrastructure to recycle these
Right.
materials,
Right. Right.
let alone to recycle them in a low carbon way that doesn't
Oh,
generate more emissions because we're like shipping
right.
this stuff all around the world. Um, I think for now we're really focused on the question of circularity more broadly, of making sure we're thinking holistically about, like, to your point, how much materials are we using? How do
Yeah.
we reduce weight? How do we reduce waste? How do we design for durability, and increase the durability of our products to keep them in cycle for longer? Um, and hope as we make progress on those that like the infrastructure will also develop to a point where we could design a shoe that is truly recyclable, and closed loop.
Yeah. So another one of our faculty members asked, how do you balance sustainability goals with selling more product and holding more inventory? Which I'm sure that people, I'm sure, ask or accuse all the time. You know, it's a hard
Yeah,
balance there.
yeah, it is a natural tension. Part of it is it's partially mitigated by our business model and the fact that like we started with one product. We're very intentional about how we build out the product line, and that the products that we do create are timeless, not seasonal. So we don't have that same like expiring inventory need to discount problem that a lot of
Yeah.
fashion companies would have. So that's the first start. But then there is a tension between like we need to grow to have the kind of impact that we want to have. Like if we are a fraction of a percentage of the global fashion industry, like it doesn't matter how good we are, we're not having impact at scale. Um, but also like we can't grow with abandon, and we need to place constraints on that. And so I think in that way, like our both our carbon labeling in terms of just making it very visible what our impact is so that people can help to hold us accountable, but also our commitment to being a carbon neutral business where we, make sure to invest in projects on our path to zero emissions. We net out our footprint by investing in projects that capture carbon. And those are just two examples of like mechanisms we put in place to kind of make sure that we're still growing in a responsible and thoughtful way.
Yeah. Have you thought about local manufacturing? Or I know other companies have tried that, and you know, to like have a factory in the US, even though they're mostly producing overseas,
Mhm.
or like on demand products where you're only filling your orders and not holding inventory.
Something we're starting to talk about more and more. I think we are, again, like historically have had so few products and thus very few factories as compared to most brands out there, and a very tight supply chain. And so I'd say we're just on the cusp of being able to implement more sophisticated manufacturing strategies like that, but are still learning.
Yeah. What about owning your own factory? Would that contribute to your sustainable goals in some way? Because you could have like the ultimate control over the power. I mean, from the materials that, I mean, if you could build it from scratch, your building materials, your power supply. I mean, it's probably a very big investment, but is that something that could be even explored?
Certainly, like those kinds of things that you outlined in terms of like renewable energy at factories are absolutely critical to us achieving our goals. So far, like because of again the way our supply chain set up, we don't own any of our factories, but we have few of them and we've worked with them for a really long time. And so we haven't really needed to
Yeah.
own our own manufacturing and can instead do that kind of work through a relationship. Um, and I think that model, yeah, it's working for us now. So we'll see, but certainly could be explored in the future.
Have you seen like the standards and the implementation of sustainable aspects of manufacturing at the factories that you work with? Have you seen that effectively change their business and how they work with other customers? And imagine um, if it works for Allbirds, and it could work for another, company that they're manufacturing for. And have you seen any, or can you tell us about something that you've seen happen at the
Yeah,
factory?
I think that's one of the most probably fulfilling parts of the job is like that's one way you can actually see tangible change
Right.
over time. Everything from as simple as like a factory when we started working with them had like the single-use disposable water bottles, plastic water bottles, to now they have like a cooler that they
Uh-huh.
fill glass cups with, to more sustained changes like the more like when we first started asking for recycled materials, for example, from some of our factories, they're like, I don't understand. Like it's not like it's not as premium of a material and it's more expensive. Like you don't want that. Like you don't want that. And us being like, no, we do.
Right,
We
right.
swear we do, and we're gonna pay for it. Over time, those same factories are coming to us like with the latest sustainable innovations, because they see that we're serious and like even as like granular and detailed as like me, I'll give presentations to our factories about how the carbon footprint of our products and how we calculated it and what's
Yeah.
driving it, and they're starting to speak that language too, which is really exciting to see.
Oh, that's very cool. Um, I think the other thing that I wanted to ask was just in terms of expanding the product line, because obviously having a small product line and very focused on only shoes was something that the company was built on and it seems like very focused from the start. And now there's apparel and socks, and I'm curious. And obviously this isn't directed or probably initiated by you, but like was it like, oh, we have all this great material, we should make other types of products, or how did you come to that? Because I was actually surprised to start seeing, I mean, I shouldn't be, it's a business, but I was surprised to see um, apparel and socks added in there.
Mhm. Yeah, it all ladders up to the idea of like how do we achieve impact and how do we do it quickly?
Yeah.
Um, all of our product ideation and development starts with the customer insight. So we always ask ourselves like, why are we making this? Why does the world need another one of these?
Right.
Um, and that starts with noticing an unmet need in the market or an area where there is not a sustainable alternative to what
Yeah.
exists. Um, so, like in performance, running shoes, that's an area we've spent decades engineering like the fastest running shoe that amplifies human performance. They're all made out of synthetics exclusively.
Yeah.
There wasn't really a natural based alternative to those products. And so while it does feel like we're expanding our product offering quite rapidly, and while of course as a sustainability professional, like that gives me a bit of apprehension always at the start, it is because we're trying to provide alternatives to people so that they don't have to have a trade-off between being sustainable and like having a product they love. That's like a false trade-off that the industry has propagated, that like either you can buy the thing that you love or you can buy the thing that's better for the planet. But you can't have both, and that's really what we're setting out to achieve, is developing products at the intersection of those things.
And so I think I'll end on one last question from one of our students, which Daniel asked: how far can you push sustainability through the production process, or just through the product, I would say? Is it possible to have all shoe components be sustainable, ethically produced, while simultaneously maintaining integrity throughout the manufacturing process? I imagine that is the goal, the overarching goal. But it's everything from your shoelaces to the eyelets, right, in the shoe. It's all the components, any insole or even a stiffener that we can't see but we can feel. And that's what you're evaluating in your carbon label, correct? Every single solitary part of the product and process.
Exactly. It's absolutely possible. Sure, we don't have all the perfect solutions today. Like we talked about, circularity of life is an area that needs further development, but it's absolutely possible to bring that level of rigor and standards to every component of the shoe and how it's made. I think it is probably going to be more expensive, and it's probably going to take longer. Um, and those have to overcome those barriers, you just need leadership, and you need CEOs like ours who believe in why this company exists and are willing to take those risks to the business or find other ways to mitigate them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest barrier to sustainability today. Of course, we need to continue to innovate on materials and things, but we really just need people who are willing to think differently about this space and really take a stand and have higher standards about the products that they make and put out into the world. So it's absolutely possible.
Well, that's a perfect way to end it, that it's absolutely possible. I thank you so much for our conversation today and being part of FIT's Sustainability Conference. Changemakers, I would call you a change maker, and for sure Allbirds is a business that is making changes that I hope will spread throughout the industry, especially the footwear industry, which has a lot of work to do. So thank you so much. It was very nice to meet you and lovely conversation.
Yeah, thanks for all the great questions.
I think I'm going to I hope that I am, you know, on an aside, I really do hope that we could have maybe some kind of relationship about the materials, because it's really hard to imagine, you know, sustainable materials or innovative materials for students. And it's so exciting. We have a student now who's getting, you know, Bloom Foam will send you one pair of outsoles, you know, so he's using them for his senior thesis, but that's one pair, one style, one, you know, predetermined, pre-made. We had to find the last to fit, you know, so, and it's great that he can get that, you know, but it's like one of those things in terms of development and just the process of it is like, it's the nature nurture, you know, cause and effect. Like if you expose the students to these new products, what would they do versus trying to imagine, you know, what they could do, basically.
Yeah, totally. I mean, yeah, we even have that challenge, like, as we're trying to procure samples of material for, like,
Sure, I'm sure you
retail
do.
stores or other prototyping, or to get to our partners, like, people we might be collaborating with, but I do wonder if there's something there. I mentioned that we're, like, focused we have, like, a community department that's focused
Yeah.
on building out different types of programming like this, and I wonder if it's something they would be interested in.
I mean, I'm not sure what Bloom Foam is doing, but I know the student was like, yeah, you can, I think for, a couple, I think he bought them. I don't think it was free, but I think for a few, however many dollars, I'll ask him.
Mhm,
But I was actually surprised that he could get them. I thought that was really cool, and a great way for him to explore the material and
mhm,
see, because admittedly, our students are learning how to design and make shoes, and we use a lot of old materials, old, not old, but there's a lot of leather, there's a lot of glue, there's a lot of EVA, there's and all that is mostly because that's the easiest stuff to
mhm,
procure at the retail
mhm,
level, especially for students, having to get school supplies. So,
mhm. Do brands ever donate dead stock?
well, yes, yes. I actually, I tell everybody I almost never say no to a donation. I say yes, 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 um, because it is something that our students get to use, and it saves them money and exposes them to maybe new materials. We have a lot of like leather showrooms that will, when they're changing the season or something, they'll give us their leather, or sample rooms from like
Mhm,
Michael Kors or whatever, and we have alumni that
mhm,
work there. But and then we've said yes to some shoe donations too, and we've been able to like take them apart and use parts of them. But that is harder, there's it's more limited in
yeah,
terms of your lasts and stuff. But and fabric too. We've got New Balance donated stuff. So I always say yes, because especially from a brand, like we have some other companies that think, we're a tax write-off, and they send us like all their leather scrap, and I'm like, yeah, I only fall for
yeah.
that once, and then I say no thank you. Now I ask people to send pictures of what they want to donate. And honestly, last year, smaller businesses closed, and we got some of their supplies or whatever. But
Mhm.
yeah, we
Well, I'll
definitely,
keep that in mind
yeah, yeah,
if
that would be
that
great.
comes up for us.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time, and it was lovely to meet you. Stay
Yeah,
healthy,
nice to meet you.
and good luck at Allbirds.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank
Take
you.
care. Thanks.
See you
Thanks,
later.
everyone. Bye.